Have you ever had like a memory just pop into your head?
Yeah.
And you know it's there,
Yeah.
but you have absolutely no idea where it came from.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a song lyric or a quote or even just like a face you feel like you've seen before.
Mm.
It's that strange feeling of remembering something but not knowing how you know it.
Yeah.
That's cryptomnesia.
Right.
And today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the connection between cryptomnesia and autism in adults.
Wow.
We're taking a look at this blog post from Cheap ABA called The Forgotten Memories, Adult Autism and Cryptomnesia.
Okay, cool.
So let's jump right in. What can you tell us about cryptomnesia in autistic adults?
Well, the first thing to understand is that cryptomnesia, it's not actually unique to autism. Anyone can experience it.
Right.
But research suggests that it might be more frequent in autistic individuals.
More frequent. So is that because autistic people are just remembering like more information overall, or there's something else going on?
It's a bit more nuanced than just remembering more. It really comes down to a few key ways that autistic brains tend to operate. Like, for example, autistic individuals often have this very detail-oriented approach to processing information.
Okay.
So where others might just skim the surface, someone on the spectrum might be absorbing every little nuance, every little detail, which allows them to pick up and store these bits of information that other people might completely miss.
So it's almost like they're seeing the world in like high definition.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Wow.
But then on top of that, there's also the fascinating way that autistic individuals connect information.
Okay.
They often make these really unique and unexpected links,
Yeah.
creating these really intricate webs of knowledge in their minds.
Wow.
And these connections can be so unique that when a memory surfaces, it can seem totally disconnected from its original context.
So it's not just about remembering more. It's about remembering differently.
Exactly.
Okay. But how does this actually like play out in someone's daily life?
Well, for starters, these unique connections and unexpected recall can be a tremendous asset.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like creativity and problem solving. The blog post actually highlights how this ability to pull up these seemingly random bits of information can lead to those like aha moments where solutions just appear out of nowhere.
That's incredible. It's like having access to this secret database in your mind that others don't have.
Right.
But I imagine there's a flip side to this too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
And this is where things can get a little bit tricky, especially for those who might already be dealing with sensory sensitivities.
Right.
Imagine this constant flow of memories with no clear origin just popping into your head.
Oh, wow.
For someone who's already sensitive to sensory input or struggling with information overload, this can be incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah. It's like having this incredible superpower, but not quite knowing how to control it. That sounds really challenging, especially when combined with other aspects of autism. Are there ways to manage this, though? The blog post mentioned some coping mechanisms, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the key suggestions is using organizational techniques to help manage that flow of information.
Okay.
So things like note-taking or mind mapping or even just talking things through, these can help to create structure and bring those memories into a more manageable framework.
So it's about making those connections explicit rather than just letting them float around randomly.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. But what about visual aids? Could those be helpful for someone who's more visually oriented?
Absolutely. Visual aids can be incredibly powerful, especially for autistic individuals who might process information more visually.
Right.
Things like diagrams or timelines or even just simple sketches.
Good.
They offer this really concrete way to connect and structure information, which can be very grounding when you're experiencing cryptomnesia.
Yeah. It's like providing a visual anchor for those memories.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What about routine? I mean, we often hear how important routine is for people on the spectrum. Could having a set routine help manage cryptomnesia as well?
You're definitely on the right track. Routine is crucial.
Yeah.
Because it creates that sense of predictability.
Right.
Think about it. Having specific times for things like journaling or reflecting or just processing information, that can really help manage that influx of memories and prevent feeling overwhelmed.
So it's about creating a system that provides structure and a sense of control over this unique way their brain is operating.
Yeah, exactly.
What about support from others? How does that factor into managing cryptomnesia?
Support is incredibly important. Having that safe space to talk about these experiences, whether it's with family or friends or therapists or even online support groups, that can be incredibly validating. It helps to reduce feelings of isolation, and it can also lead to new coping strategies.
right? So hearing others' experiences can help normalize these feelings
Mm.
and make them feel less alone in this. I'm also wondering about the neurological side of things. Like, is there anything we know about how cryptomnesia actually manifests in the brain?
That's a great question. And it's one that researchers are still exploring. You
Yeah.
know, while we know that cryptomnesia isn't limited to autism, understanding its connection to the unique neurology of autistic individuals,
Right.
it's a fascinating area of study.
Yeah.
For instance, some research suggests that certain brain regions that are involved in memory and pattern recognition,
Oh,
they may be particularly active in autistic individuals.
interesting.
And this could be connected to their heightened experience of cryptomnesia.
So there's a possibility that the very brain structures that allow autistic individuals to see patterns and make connections in such unique ways could also be contributing to this phenomenon of cryptomnesia. That's really interesting. But I'm also wondering about the broader implications. Like, if we understand how these brains are wired differently, can we start to see cryptomnesia not just as a challenge,
Mm,
but as a potential strength?
absolutely. And that's what makes this topic so fascinating. By understanding the neurological underpinnings of cryptomnesia in autistic adults,
Right.
we can move away from viewing it as a deficit and start to see it as this valuable part of neurodiversity.
This is such an important point. We often talk about celebrating neurodiversity,
Yeah.
but it's crucial to actually understand what that means on a practical level.
Right.
And understanding phenomena like cryptomnesia helps us do just that.
Absolutely.
But before we go too far down that road, I want to loop back to our listener for a moment. Have you ever experienced something similar? That feeling of knowing something but not being able to place the source. It's a fascinating phenomenon that we're only just beginning to understand.
Uh-huh.
But let's dive a little deeper into the potential benefits and challenges of cryptomnesia, specifically for autistic individuals.
Okay, let's do it. That's a really thought-provoking question. And it gets to the heart of how we can create a more inclusive and supportive world for neurodivergent individuals.
Mhm.
Like, if we just start by acknowledging that there isn't one right way to think or learn,
Yeah.
we open up a world of possibilities.
It challenges that whole notion of what we even consider normal, doesn't it? Like, if we just start from the premise that autistic cognitive styles are just as valid as neurotypical ones,
Right.
how would that change our approach to education or workplaces or even just social interactions?
It would be a radical shift, wouldn't it? Like, imagine a world where educational systems were designed to cater to different learning styles,
Yeah.
where visual learners and kinesthetic learners and those who thrive on routine and structure
Right.
all had the opportunity to learn in a way that plays to their strengths.
Okay.
Instead of trying to fit everyone into this one-size-fits-all model,
Yeah.
we could embrace the richness of neurodiversity and create learning environments where everyone can flourish.
I love that idea. It's about moving away from that deficit-based model of education
Right.
and instead focusing on nurturing the unique potential within each individual.
Yeah.
But how would we apply that same thinking to the workplace?
Yeah.
I mean, workplaces are often structured around very specific expectations and routines.
Mm-hmm.
How do we create flexibility within those structures to accommodate different cognitive styles?
It's a great question, and it might require some creative rethinking of how we approach work.
Okay.
Like, for example, we could explore flexible work arrangements
Mm-hmm.
that allow individuals to work remotely or set their own hours. Um, we could also reconsider how we evaluate performance,
Oh.
recognizing that different cognitive styles might lead to different approaches to problem solving and task completion.
Right.
Like, instead of prioritizing speed and efficiency, we could value creativity and innovation and the ability to see connections that others might miss.
That's a really interesting point. It's about shifting our metrics of success
Yeah,
to recognize a wider range of skills and talents. And wouldn't that benefit everyone in the workplace,
absolutely.
not just neurodivergent individuals?
For sure.
Like, imagine the innovation that could come from embracing those different perspectives and approaches.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of inclusivity where everyone feels valued and respected for their unique contributions.
Okay.
And I think that same principle applies to social interactions as well.
Okay.
We need to be more mindful of the different ways that people communicate and interact.
So instead of expecting everyone to adhere to the same social norms and expectations,
Right.
we need to create space for different communication styles.
Yeah, exactly.
But what would that look like in practice?
Well, for starters, it might involve being more patient and understanding when someone communicates in a way that we're not used to.
Okay.
It might mean being willing to ask clarifying questions, or to adapt our own communication style to better meet the needs of the other person. It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe to be themselves without fear of judgment or misunderstanding.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
It's about moving away from the idea of there being a right way to socialize
Right.
and instead embracing the richness and diversity of human interaction.
Exactly.
But I'm also wondering about the role of technology in all of this. Could technology play a role in creating more inclusive and accommodating environments?
Absolutely. Technology can be a powerful tool for bridging communication gaps
Hmm.
and creating more accessible and inclusive experiences.
Yeah?
Like, for example, there are already a number of apps and tools designed to support autistic individuals in
Wow.
areas like communication or social skills or sensory regulation.
Okay.
And as technology continues to evolve, we can expect to see even more innovative solutions that cater to the unique needs of neurodivergent individuals.
I'm really excited to see how technology can be used to empower and support neurodiversity. But let's bring it back to cryptomnesia for a moment. We've talked about the potential benefits and challenges, but I'm curious about your perspective as an expert.
Sure.
Do you think cryptomnesia is ultimately more of a gift or a burden for autistic individuals?
That's a tough question, and I don't think there's a simple answer.
Okay.
Like, we've discussed the experience of cryptomnesia. It's incredibly personal and nuanced.
Right.
It can be both a source of frustration and a source of strength,
Yeah.
depending on the individual and their circumstances.
Hmm.
I think the key is to view cryptomnesia not as something to be fixed,
Right.
but rather as this unique aspect of neurodiversity
Yeah.
that can be both challenging and rewarding.
Okay.
It's about finding ways to support individuals in harnessing the potential benefits of cryptomnesia while also providing strategies for managing the challenges it can present.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about meeting people where they are and providing individualized support based on their specific needs and experiences.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about the role of research in all of this. What are some of the key questions that researchers are still trying to answer when it comes to cryptomnesia and autism?
There are so many fascinating questions that are still being explored. Like, for instance, researchers are trying to understand the neurological underpinnings of cryptomnesia in more detail.
Okay.
They're looking at brain imaging studies to see if there are specific brain regions or neural pathways that are involved in this phenomenon. They're also trying to understand how genetic factors might contribute to the likelihood of experiencing cryptomnesia.
So it's about understanding the complex interplay between genetics and brain structure and individual experience.
Right.
But how does that research translate into practical strategies for supporting autistic individuals who experience cryptomnesia?
That's where the rubber meets the road, doesn't it? Like, the goal of this research is to develop evidence-based interventions and therapies
Yeah.
that can help individuals manage the challenges of cryptomnesia and harness its potential benefits.
All right.
For example, some researchers are exploring the use of mindfulness techniques to help individuals become more aware of their thought patterns and to better regulate the flow of memories.
Mhm.
Others are exploring the use of cognitive behavioral therapy
Yeah.
to help individuals challenge negative thoughts and beliefs associated with cryptomnesia.
It's about giving people the tools and strategies they need to feel more in control of their own cognitive experiences.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to remember that research takes time,
Yeah.
and we can't wait for all the answers before we start taking action.
Mm.
There are things we can do right now to create more inclusive and supportive environments for autistic individuals who experience cryptomnesia.
Absolutely. We can start by educating ourselves and others about cryptomnesia and its connection to autism. We can advocate for more inclusive educational systems and workplaces.
Yeah.
And we can create a culture of acceptance and understanding where neurodiversity is celebrated rather than stigmatized.
It's about recognizing that everyone's brain works a little differently,
Yeah.
and that those differences are what make us unique and valuable.
Exactly.
But I'm also wondering about the role of personal narratives in all of this. Like, how can we amplify the voices of autistic individuals who experience cryptomnesia
Right.
and learn from their lived experience?
That's such an important question. We need to create platforms where autistic individuals can share their stories in their own words.
Okay.
They need to listen to their perspectives on the challenges and benefits of cryptomnesia and incorporate their insights into research and interventions and policy decisions.
It's about recognizing that autistic individuals are the experts on their own experiences.
Right.
And that their perspectives are essential to creating a more inclusive and supportive world. But I'm also curious about your personal perspective on this. Have you encountered individuals in your work who have shared their experiences with cryptomnesia?
I have, and it's always a privilege to hear their stories. One individual I worked with described cryptomnesia as feeling like they had access to this vast library of information, but without a card catalog to help them find what they were looking for.
Wow.
It was a beautiful analogy that captured both the wonder and the frustration of this experience.
What a powerful image. It really highlights the importance of finding ways to help individuals organize and navigate that vast internal library. But I'm also wondering about the ethical considerations surrounding cryptomnesia. Are there any potential ethical dilemmas that arise when we talk about supporting autistic individuals who experience this phenomenon?
That's a great question, and one that we need to approach with sensitivity and care. I think one of the key ethical considerations is ensuring that any interventions or therapies are developed and implemented with the full consent and autonomy of the individual. We need to be mindful of the potential for coercion or exploitation,
Yeah.
and make sure that any support provided is truly aligned with the individual's needs and goals.
It's about respecting the agency and self-determination of autistic individuals and ensuring that they have a voice in decisions that affect their lives. But I'm also wondering about the potential for bias in research and clinical practice. How can we make sure that our understanding of cryptomnesia is not skewed by preconceived notions or assumptions about autism?
That's a crucial point. We need to be aware of our own biases and actively work to mitigate them.
Okay.
This involves involving autistic individuals in all aspects of research and clinical practice,
Wait.
from study design to data analysis to dissemination of findings.
Okay.
It also involves being critical of existing research and challenging assumptions that may not be supported by evidence.
It's about creating a more collaborative and inclusive approach to research, where the perspectives of autistic individuals are valued and respected.
Exactly.
But I'm also wondering about the role of advocacy in all of this. How can we advocate for policies and practices that support autistic individuals who experience cryptomnesia?
Advocacy is essential. We need to raise awareness about cryptomnesia and its impact on autistic individuals. We need to push for more funding for research and support services. And we need to work to create a more inclusive and accepting society where neurodiversity is celebrated rather than stigmatized.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued and supported regardless of how their brain is wired.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful vision to strive for. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leap back to our listener for a moment.
This has been a truly insightful conversation, and I hope our listener is feeling inspired to learn more about this fascinating topic. There's so much more to explore, and I encourage you to continue digging deeper into the world of cryptomnesia and its connection to autism. But for now, let's transition to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some practical tips and resources for supporting autistic individuals who experience cryptomnesia.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive about cryptomnesia and autism. We've talked about that fascinating connection, the potential benefits and challenges,
Okay.
and the importance of creating a more inclusive and supportive world for neurodivergent individuals.
Right.
But now I want to know what we can actually do. Like, what are some practical steps we can take to support those who experience cryptomnesia? What advice would you give to someone listening who's maybe just starting to recognize these patterns in themselves or in someone they care about?
That's a great question. And it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Of course.
But there are some general strategies that can be helpful.
Okay.
One of the most important things is to create a sense of structure and predictability.
Okay. We talked about routine earlier,
Okay.
but how does that actually translate into practical tips for someone dealing with the unpredictable nature of cryptomnesia?
Well, think about establishing regular times for things like reflection or journaling,
Okay.
or even just talking things through with a trusted friend or family member.
Okay.
These routines can help create a sense of control and make it easier to process that influx of memories that can come with cryptomnesia.
Right. So it's about creating a container for those experiences.
Yeah.
Rather than just letting them spill out randomly throughout the day. What about organizational tools? Are there specific tools or techniques that you found to be particularly helpful for people with cryptomnesia?
There are. And again, it really depends on the individual and what works best for them.
Right.
Some people find visual organizers like mind maps or flowcharts to be really helpful for
Right.
making connections and seeing patterns. Others prefer more linear approaches like note-taking or list-making.
Okay.
The key is to experiment and find what feels most natural and effective for you.
That makes sense. It's about finding a system that works for your unique cognitive style. But what about the social and emotional aspects of cryptomnesia? We talked about the potential for misunderstandings and anxiety. How can someone navigate those challenges?
I think open communication is key.
Okay,
If
yeah.
you're struggling with cryptomnesia, let the people close to you know what you're experiencing.
Uh-huh.
Explain that sometimes you might remember things without being able to recall the source,
Right.
and that it's not intentional deception.
Yeah,
This can help prevent misunderstandings and create a more supportive environment.
right. Transparency and education can go a long way in fostering understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
What about self-care? What role does self-care play in managing the challenges of cryptomnesia?
Self-care is crucial,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with something like cryptomnesia,
Right.
which can be both mentally and emotionally taxing. So
Yeah.
make sure you're prioritizing things like getting enough sleep,
Yeah.
eating a healthy diet, and engaging in activities that bring you joy and relaxation.
Okay.
And don't underestimate the power of mindfulness practices, like meditation or deep breathing exercises.
Yeah.
These practices can really help you stay grounded and better manage that influx of thoughts and memories that can come with cryptomnesia.
Right. It's about creating a sense of inner calm amidst the potential chaos of cryptomnesia.
Yeah.
But what about seeking professional support? When would you recommend someone reach out to a therapist or counselor?
If cryptomnesia is causing you significant distress, or it's interfering with your daily life,
Yeah.
it's definitely a good idea to seek professional help.
Okay.
A therapist can help you develop coping strategies, work through any underlying anxiety or emotional distress,
Mhm.
and provide a safe space to process your experiences.
Yeah. It's a reminder that you don't have to go through this alone.
Right.
There are resources and support systems available to help you navigate the challenges of cryptomnesia. But let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the potential benefits.
Okay.
We touched on the idea of cryptomnesia as a source of creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
How can someone tap into that potential and harness the power of these unexpected connections?
That's a great question. One thing I always encourage people to do is to embrace their curiosity.
Yeah.
Like if a random memory pops into your head, don't dismiss it. Explore it. See where it leads. You might be surprised at the insights and connections you discover.
So it's about viewing cryptomnesia not as a hindrance,
Right.
but as an opportunity for exploration and discovery.
Exactly.
Okay. What about practical applications? Are there specific fields or professions where someone with cryptomnesia might thrive?
Oh, absolutely. There are. Think about fields like research or writing or art or even entrepreneurship.
Okay.
These are all areas where the ability to make unexpected connections and see things from a different perspective, that can be a huge asset.
So it's not just about managing the challenges of cryptomnesia.
Right.
It's about reframing it as a potential strength
Yeah.
and finding ways to leverage those unique cognitive abilities.
Exactly.
What about the role of community in all of this? How can connecting with others who experience cryptomnesia be beneficial?
Connecting with others who understand what you're going through can be incredibly validating and empowering.
Okay.
It can help you feel less alone,
Yeah.
reduce feelings of shame or self-doubt, and it can provide a space to share coping strategies and support each other.
Right. Community can be such a powerful force for healing and growth.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that even in the midst of these unique and sometimes challenging experiences, we're not alone. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to our listener one last time. We've explored a lot of information today,
Yeah.
and it can be a lot to process. If there's one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with, what would it be?
I think the most important thing to remember is that cryptomnesia is not a sign of weakness or deficiency.
All right.
It's just a unique way that some brains are wired, and it can be both a challenge and a gift. So embrace your neurodiversity, celebrate your strengths, and seek support when you need it.
That's a beautiful message to end on. Embrace your neurodiversity, celebrate your strengths, and seek support when you need it. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of cryptomnesia and autism. We hope you found this exploration insightful and empowering. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those curiosities piqued.